Welcome to Flat Earth Debate Live. I'm your host, Nathan Oakley, and if you are new to this channel, then you will be used to my camera not being frozen when I do this introduction. If you are new to this channel, then be sure to subscribe, hit the bell notification icon and join button to keep up to date with the Flat Earth debate. That's completely thrown me off. I'm just going to go straight into introducing the panel. My camera froze and that just completely threw me off my intro. We are joined by 10th Man, Neil, Adam, and a whole bunch of people in Discord. So welcome one and all.
Afternoon, guys.
How are you?
Check out any other debate for the full intro, e-begging, sponsorships, nonsense, all that. Any other video but this one. It's going to be one of those shows.
Unflappable on that by now, Nathan.
It completely threw me. You have a look out the corner of your eye and you know if things are working. I glance out the corner of my eye, I'm like, is this worth looking at? Because you don't want to look away from the camera. As soon as I looked away from the camera, I'm like, oh, right, well, obviously something's wrong there then. Well, not to worry. It is a public chant today, so you can actually join in the public discourse, or whatever you want to call it, the live stream chat feed. If you're a non-member, you can actually chat today. So enjoy the live chant. I want to continue the conversation. Maybe we'll do housekeeping. Let's turn off these studio lights. I don't need those anymore. The conversation that was going on in the pre-show was about flat Earth. I'm going to use this word intentionally, infecting other subjects that you wouldn't necessarily associate with flat Earth. And I've discussed it so many times now on other shows where I'll come across a subject that I think is interesting, and as escapism, if you want to call it that, because it's work. This is my job. I'm not going to beat around the bush when it comes to describing what I do for a living. This is it. YouTubing, flat Earth, that's what I do. So when you do YouTubing in the respect that most people do YouTubing, which is watch a video, you don't necessarily want it to be anything to do with flat Earth. You just want to watch a video about cars, and then you come across Engineering Explained, doing a video on flat Earth. Or you want to watch a video about horror, and then you find 42's doing a video about flat Earth. Or you want to watch a video about hi-fi, and you come across GR Research wearing a flat Earth t-shirt telling you that you're a flat Earther if you don't believe his smoke and mirrors snake oil stories about cabling. So you end up with this subject making its way into the list goes on and on and on. That was just 3 examples. There are plenty more examples that I could give you of subjects that I've come across that aren't anything to do with the subject, that suddenly they're for whatever reason discussing flat Earth. And Neil, just before we went into the live show intro that failed miserably, was telling us of his experience of exactly the same thing. I don't know if you want to carry on that so we can keep the conversation flow going, Neil.
Yeah, I was just saying that this guy, he just brought up flat Earth and how people get into conspiracies, and they just, no matter what, you show them the science and they still don't believe it. So I was like, this guy's unreal. So I started chatting and I started saying, well, Earth is flat. Why don't you look into it? And then I just plugged your channel. I said, pop on for debate anytime. You'll find you have no science. That was it.
What surprised me in one of the comments of that, the most recent video I've released by GR Research, was one of his commenters specifically noted that he didn't say he was a flat earther. He said, you have no idea how many people who watch your videos are flat earthers and are interested in crossovers or whatever. I can't remember exactly. I'm paraphrasing very badly. I can't remember exactly how the commenter phrased it. But the commenter was basically saying, look, a lot of your audience are flat earthers, you realise. In other words, don't talk down to flat earthers. Just talk about crossovers. Right? That's your channel. Do what you do, because that's what I've come for. Now, his sentiment was exactly my sentiment, and I responded to him. I was like, yeah, I intended to make a video on this guy. And it's true, I almost got to the end of editing a video on it and then decided against it. I'm like, why get between this guy and his earnings? I don't see the point. It's not enough just because he's been sent a t-shirt. Go on, whoever that is.
You know what bothers
Hello.
me? They don't even look into it. Hey, they don't even look into it. They just dog you and that's it.
Well, in this case,
trolls are strong today.
Well,
They're not in numbers.
The audio guy with the cable, he's just pure stereotypical.
In his attitude, but he's a total normie in that regard. I've got no issue with him being a total normie. That's why I stopped making the first video that I edited. It's still sat on my iPad, not going to be completed. But I've got no issue with that. So if it's like, well, I don't really get this, but yeah, of course Earth's a sphere. You're like, am I going to go away and debunk this guy? He's not associated with the subject. Someone's just sent him a T-shirt. But it gets worse, or that was why I edited the first video, because he's saying, well, you're a flat earther if you don't believe my cable nonsense. You're like, well, okay, I get it. You want to sort of associate this free T-shirt with the subject that you're covering. That is almost enough for me to make and publish a video. Enough for me to edit one, for sure. But then when it goes, all of the above, plus science, and then claiming science when you're talking about listening tests, and then if you don't believe my anecdotal evidence of a listening test being better, you're a flat earther. It's like, well, that's just a step too far now. I've got to respond. So check that video out. It's called Snake Oil versus Flat Earth versus Science. Or Hi-Fi versus Science versus Flat Earth. I've forgotten the title. It doesn't matter. You'll see it. It's got a guy wearing Earth Isn't Flat, we checked, on his T-shirt.
Well, in a way, it's kind of funny, though, that the liars in all fields, are basically giving us free advertisement. They're basically saying, oh, we're trying to cover up our nonsense and lies. It's getting kind of obvious. Oh, flat earther. So everybody's going to just associate it white. So flat earthers are against these liars. Okay.
He wasn't.
Yeah.
He wasn't. Well, I'd not see. I just saw your premiere earlier, Nate. But he kind of wasn't really addressing. It didn't strike me he was addressing flat Earth as such. He was more using it in a Barack Obama kind of ad hom sense in related to the other people, and then that was. Or has he got a bit more history with flat Earth? Has he?
No, he hasn't. That's as much as it goes. And like I said, I wouldn't necessarily react, or almost did, to that if that was all it was. Because you're like, yeah, you're just using it as an ad hom. Exactly correct, Adam. So is that enough for me to start debunking him on a flat Earth basis? No. But when you're like, here's my smoke and mirrors snake oil. Here's my power conditioner. Now, for anybody who's like, well, so what? It's like, no. If you've got a correctly designed amplifier, no power conditioner is going to make a slightest bit of difference to it. It's absolutely preposterous. So, yeah, you can argue to a certain degree that speaker cables can make a difference. If you get them wrong, you can make it worse. So, yeah, you can just about make that argument. When it gets up to thousands of pounds for speaker pipe cables, it's just nonsense. The same with power conditioners, but there is no benefit whatsoever. You could get the gauge wrong slightly and not have enough current go through it and it get hot. But that's about it. If you've got enough copper in there's enough wire, that's all you need. The amplifier should be capable of dealing with any interference that comes down the mains. If it's not, it's a shit amplifier. So to propose that you need power conditioners is the most absurd nonsense you could have in terms of a claim for improving audio fidelity, which is very much measurable. And this is the point. Measuring things is not science. Now, a lot of these clowns out there that punt smoke and mirrors will claim science. And they're actually doing something, measuring and presenting their data, which is great. It's just not science. Again, not enough for me to get involved and call foul. It's vernacular that is part of the general world's vernacular. They all use this magic trick when they're doing maths and claim science. Now you go, okay, fine. You know, it doesn't frustrate me to the point where I need to address them in a flat earth manner. But as I say, when it gets to a list of, I'm talking science, this is me talking on behalf third person for GR research, he's talking about science, and then talking about your denial of science being, making you a flat earther. You know, at that point, that's the trifecta that gets you a response from a flat earther. And in this instance, he's not worthy of attack on flat earth level, but I know every little detail there is to know about his bullshit when it comes to mains conditioning cables. Utter horseshit. So it's like, fine, you know, you want to keep making videos and addressing flat earthers who don't believe your nonsense, then you're going to get a response that actually calls out your nonsense in hi-fi terms.
Yeah, that reminds me of the saying, don't throw rocks if you live in glass houses.
Yeah, if you're gonna go around punting your smoke and mirrors, to a degree I'll be sympathetic. It's like, yeah, you got to make a profit, right? And I get it. People need wire to up their margins. I get it. You got to make a living. So yeah, it's smoke and mirrors. But on the other hand, I've done it too. I was in the industry. I totally get it. So that gets a pass. Yeah, you could debunk it. Yeah, you could present measurements. Yeah, you could show it's all nonsense. But that's part of the industry. Why take away a man's meal when you don't need to? But moving that into the realms of you're an idiot if you don't believe me and you're a flat earther, therefore, oh, God, that's too far. Or is it? Well, it is when they start saying that what they've got is science. It's like, no, right, that's it now. Science, you're a flat earther if you don't believe me and you're not presenting any. Sod that.
No, it happens to all of us. It's happened to me on several occasions where the topic will come up, and this is the way it comes out of the other person's mouth. Don't tell me you're a flat earther. I mean, that's already derogatory by the tonality and the way they say it. So it's a perfect opportunity to throw back and have a nice conversation. Oh, what do you know about it? You know, or why do you say it in that tone? I mean, it is derogatory when they do it. So it's like, okay, you just opened up yourself for a nice debate because happen to be a little bit knowledgeable here.
Just tell them until they give you some type of measured curvature, you're a flat earther as well. So, haha.
Yeah, you're a curvature without curvature.
The art of curve without curving.
So for anybody who's just joining us,
level is curved now, right?
For anybody who's just joining us, the subject at hand is flat Earth seeping into other non-flat Earth subjects on YouTube, and how you'll be watching as a flat earther a video, and then suddenly the subject will come up from a car YouTuber. You'll be watching a video about Top Gear style shoot-offs with second-hand cars, and then they're talking about how flat earthers think and feel, and you're like, what the hell is this?
Yeah, it's filtering into all kinds of areas because they need to let people know through these little jibes that take at us that we're dumb people. We don't know what we're talking about. We're not into science. And it's all the pseudoscience people making up all this stuff, saying this about us. They don't even know what science is. They're denying science now.
Exactly.
To
People
me-
who would
to
claim
me,
we're
it just means
deniers
it's just getting,
Go on, Chocolate.
it's getting bigger and bigger.
I was about to say, the people who claim we're deniers of science are the first people that will claim science where they aren't actually using the scientific method. It isn't science. But they'll be the first to claim it and then look down their nose at flat earthers. In this instance, us, where we actually do apply science to the claims that are being made about a sphere Earth. And what do we find? They're completely bogus.
Yeah. Hey everyone. Hey Nathan. Or they'll use, or while saying that, they'll wear a T-shirt that says "Not flat. We checked" from NASA.
Right.
Which
Exactly.
is the complete antithesis. Sorry, I said that one wrong. From the truth. NASA didn't check from a sky vacuum because it doesn't exist. When NASA did check, they very clearly state that it's flat and stationary. They're talking
Exactly.
about their aircraft
Exactly.
and how it flies.
Exactly. If you had more than 25 seconds in the argument, you'd appreciate from us that the claims from NASA are all automatically debunked by the second law of thermodynamics. The sky is not a vacuum. If it was, the air we're breathing would expand in all directions to fill it, and we'd all be dead. Therefore, the sky is not a vacuum in violation of natural law. There is no trips to take pictures of the Earth from space. They have not checked anything. They've lied through their back teeth about an area that doesn't exist, that they claim to take pictures from, and they claim to travel to different rocks that are actually lights in the sky through. Well, if they can travel through the sky vacuum, the air that's expanding at high speeds can also expand into that area, and that's what gas does. We'd never develop pressure, we'd all be dead. Life would never have existed if the sky was a vacuum. We'd never develop pressure. Therefore, the sky vacuum's fake. Outer space is fake.
Right. Did you say they had a T-shirt that said NASA's checked?
So somebody sent him a T-shirt, and this is where this began several weeks ago. And he opens up the T-shirt and says, look, I don't really understand any of this. Someone sent me a T-shirt that says, Earth's not flat, we checked. And it's got it in a style of... Go on.
Wouldn't that then be an apparel to authority fallacy?
Yes, I suppose it was. It's not him that's checking. We checked. Who's we? The authorities.
apparel to authority. I like that.
Thank you. Thank you, Chocolate. I was waiting for 10th, but no one else got it.
Missed that. I missed that. Sorry.
I missed it too. Go.
Over here, guys.
Well, chocolate doesn't miss anything.
Just so people are clear.
Flatsoid said it best, is what you said. If Earth is closed, we can't go out. If it's open, we're all dead.
Exactly. They're either lying about travelling out to the second law of thermodynamics violation sky vacuum, in which case every single claim that they make is fake, or we're in a contained system. Now, we have gas pressure. That is proof that we are in a contained system, because without the container, there'd be no pressure. And if, as you can see on screen, this area, although it's cross-section cartoon like every single Sphere Earth picture, here we go, it's a better one. This is high-pressure gas, and this is 10 to the minus 17 torr vacuum. Absolutely absurd. The gas would fill the space. If this is a vacuum, gas is going to be filling it. The space is fake. They haven't checked anything.
Indeed.
Just lied.
And when you ask them for a demonstration of a vacuum of any type, they have to put it in a container and take out all the air. So they can't even have a vacuum without a container to demonstrate here on Earth. And they want us to believe in this picture that there's nothing between the Earth and the sun there, and everything in between is a vacuum. And somehow magically the air hangs around Earth.
Before we get to the end of this particular discussion, because we veered off away from the video that I made recently or this morning, I want to do a shout out to the guy whose chunk of video I used to debunk the claims about mains conditioners, and that's Ethan Weiner. So Ethan, obviously spelled as Ethan, but Weiner, W-I-N-E-R. And Ethan Weiner is possibly my favourite, if not my second favourite acoustician out there. Very straight talking, ex-audio engineer, has set up multitudes of studios, done multitudes of recordings, wrote books that are used in universities to teach acoustics. The guy knows his stuff. Now, he also understands how to test things, and the equipment's industry standardized for testing. And he knows what to test, how to test it, and he explains in that video. The section that I used was the most concise version I could find that crammed almost everything I could think of that you can test when it comes to audio fidelity. Something that's been well established for hundreds of years now. In terms of the testing,
So,
for the last 80 years, we've had the ability to test this stuff. So there's not much outside the remit of being able to test and justify and show how things differ in terms of quality. So all this, you have to listen bullshit. No, you don't. We know how to test. We know how to measure. It's not science, it's measuring. Nevertheless, that bullshit is used a lot, and Ethan Weiner dissects it, and he's, like I say, he's one of my favourites. He's absolutely fantastic. Check him out. Check out his Audio Myths workshop. There's a link to that directly below the video that I made this morning. So if nothing else, check out Ethan Weiner. He's brilliant, brilliant guy.
So Nathan, are you saying he gave you sound advice?
Yes, he did indeed. So many of the things that he talks about in terms of acoustically treating a studio, which I've been doing for the last 8 or 9 months, I've taken a lot of his advice and put it into practical application, put my money where my mouth is, bought stuff. So yeah, that's a testament to what he says, and he's taught me many things that I never thought I'd ever know. Having worked in studios, having worked with audio equipment for a good chunk of my life, he's still taught me huge amounts of things that I had no idea even existed as knowledge.
Keep talking, Nathan, because Sleeping Warrior is going to jump all over me right now.
Oh, okay.
Can I just say, Tenth, that your attempts at humour are really lowering the tone of the show.
Oh, I'll tell you what lowered my tone earlier, Tony, was your video, but boy, was I laughing.
Yeah.
I've
got to say, if the Blathers want to claim gravity is a force, even though we know it's not, then we can equivocate that and say that you must therefore accept that fish that isn't the most putrid fish is really quite acceptable. So I want to see them demonstrate it. So shout out to the fish company that's made a fortune. Do you know, since then I've looked up how expensive those fish tins are. 25 quid.
You know, it's supposed to be opened underwater. That's where the guy made the mistake. When
have you ever had smoked cats, Nathan?
I've eaten a lot of disgusting things in my time as a rep. So when you're out schmoozing somebody to try and get them to buy your product, if you're out in a foreign land, they'll take you to a high-class restaurant. They'll want to impress you as much as you want to impress them, just culturally the way it is if you're a guest in someone's country. And over the course of my time as a rep, the amount of things that I had to shovel into my mouth and go, that's delicious. Knowing full well that it was repugnant.
Cats was one.
Let's not. When I put it in comments, it's much nicer than when I say it verbally, Anthony. Let's just move on.
I'm just waiting for the spam. Nathan's a cat eater.
Yeah, I've eaten cat, I've eaten dog, I've eaten all sorts of horrible, horrible things. The most repugnant thing I can imagine that I ate was actually an egg, as opposed to similar process to what your is it mackerel? I forget the fish that's in that particular tin. Very disgusting.
Ooh, the 1,000-year-old egg.
Yeah, I have. Yes, correct. A black egg. Correct. Fermented in its own shell. And it was repugnant. That was probably the most vile thing. And no, there was something else I ate in Hong Kong that was even more disgusting. And that was one of their... the reason Hong Kong's called Hong Kong is because Hong Kong loosely translates to fragrant bay. If you've ever been to Hong Kong, there's a massive bay. So, obvious reason. But it stinks. And inside the bay, they've got crabs. And they catch the crabs, which are all diseased, and they serve them up as a delicacy. Especially, they've got to be the diseased ones, because they taste better. Right?
What the... Really?
So that was something else equally repugnant that I ate. And that particular time, that was one of the few times that my the director of the company was with me when I was eating those crabs in Hong Kong. And and I ate it and told the person I was schmoozing that it was delicious and thank you so much and wow, what hospitality. But my boss didn't. And afterwards I was like, why didn't you eat it? It's like, because it was disgusting. And I was like, yeah, but we're here to, you've got to show. And he's like, no, I don't. Look, gave me that look that was
Very
like, that's what I'm paying you for.
Very professional.
I guess the moral to the story is if they equivocate, like that gravity is not really a force, but they can think of it as a force, then they can also think of the not smelliest of fish to be, really quite placid and quite nice. So I look forward to that one, Blurthers.
All in the preparation.
Does it mean we can, if they start equivocating, are we just allowed to start going?
Yeah. Yeah.
I didn't watch that bit of the video. I didn't watch because I knew what was coming. But as soon as I saw him starting to open the can, I'm like, what are you doing? That's not how you prepare that. You're supposed to open it underwater because otherwise the smell is repugnant and that's what will linger in the air as you're eating it. So, it didn't prepare the food correctly. It's supposed to be, I've not eaten it. It's supposed to be quite nice. But if you open it underwater in a different place that you're going to actually consume it. But there we go.
But how about the juices, though? How about pouring that in a glass and then...
Do you know what? I watched a video. I watched about 8 of these last night, and one of the guys described the smell of the juice. He said it's like the juice that you get at the bottom of your bin.
Right, it's rotten, literally rotten.
Yeah, it's rotten. That's what it is. It's rotten. That's
fermentation.
Correct. Yes, correct. It's designed to ferment, rot, in a particular way. So they're not adding enough salt to preserve it. That's the idea. Anyway,
Just in
how
case
I
you're
know about
wondering,
these
it's called
horrible foods.
Stroming, and it's on it's my most recent upload on my channel. Go and check it out. Sub if you don't mind it, because it's quite an interesting video.
I'm sure I've been offered it. Which country is it native to? Because I'm sure I've been offered it.
Sweden.
Yeah, I've been in Sweden. I'm pretty sure I've been offered it, but declined. So but that's probably why I know how it's supposed to be prepared, because it was probably sold or pitched to me at some point. You know what I mean? It's like, no, I think I'm going to pass on this one.
Well, if all they had to do was add salt, then that might have accelerated the process, Anthony.
Boom, boom.
If you come to England, the native dish, if you go anywhere at Northwest, if you go anywhere near Blackpool, it's rock. We don't give them the shit from the sea. We give them proper quality sugar candy. It's fine. Go to Sweden and they give you this disgusting stuff.
Right,
I heard in Iceland they got fish lollies.
Got a super chat from Godzilla37. It says, a force is a force, of course, unless it's a horse that you can still think of as a force. Thank you very much for the super chat.
If gravity's not a force, but you can think of it as a force, that essentially means that anything can be anything if you just think of it as anything. So that means that I've not been vaccinated, but you can think that I have. So I don't need to wear any masks. I can go anywhere I want. I can breathe all over you because you think that I've been vaccinated.
No, you can't. Don't do that to me. Ever.
I won't.
I can breathe all over you.
Can you imagine being breathed all over with somebody that's just recently consumed surströmming? They would think that you've got an allergy.
Well, I think if you would eat surströmming and then breathe all over them, I think you would be rushed to the hospital because they think you'd probably be rotting inside.
I think they'd be rushed to hospital as well.
Maybe.
Did you notice the can? When he pulled out the can, because it's obviously expanded within the container, the can itself was bulging. Did you notice?
Yeah.
That's the gas expanding inside the container.
So even surströmming needs a container.
Yeah.
Well, the gas is trying to expand, and it's got so much pressure inside the can that it literally buckles the can.
Yep. Smell spreads in all directions.
I wonder why it's not a smelly from Sweden, like the native smelly.
That's because it comes in parallel rays.
Right, let's do some housekeeping, right? Because otherwise we're going to have a completely very semi-flat Earth related. Anyway.
Look, I'm bringing flat Earth terms and baller terms into this. That's pretty good.
Any evidence?
No, it's I've got to correct that, Nathan. I can't allow you to say that it's semi-flat Earth related. It's absolutely flat Earth related because the blurthers pretend that gravity is a force, even though it's expressly defined as an effect. Well, in that case, we can just say that smelly fish isn't the most smelliest of fishes, so we can think that it's somewhere in the middle. Would you like your fish on a plate, or would you like it straight out of the tin, blurther?
But they can think of gravity whatever they want because they have their own gravity. It's their colloquial gravity. Come on, you can't expect the general public to actually apply the official standards, do you? Come on.
Have we done the gas pressure without a container?
We haven't done any housekeeping questions.
Oh, well, ask that one next then. Let's move to that.
Next? First, you mean? Any evidence you can have gas pressure without the necessary antecedent of a container to press upon?
Well, when we talk about gravity, right, they use the Cavendish experiment to make the claim or to illustrate or to attempt to explain with experiment that mass attracts mass. Now, we all know that doesn't do that, but at least they've got an experiment that they claim that we can then pick apart. Given that we're in a gravitational field on their model, where is the experiment that's the equivalent experiment to the Cavendish experiment for gas pressure that's not gas pressure that doesn't go into the available volume? Where is that? We're in it, right? So we're in a gravitational field. Where is the test that demonstrates gas pressure without a container? Where is it?
Well, they have their own Cavendish response to that, and that is the plasmoid thing being kept to a magnet. Remember? That's their Cavendish explanation for gas
inside a nuclear reactor. Is that the one you're on about?
I don't know.
So plasmoids.
Plasma, remember? Plasma.
It's inside a nuclear. It's inside a hydrogen fusion container.
Sounds like a container, but it also doesn't sound like a gas.
Plasma. So it's all plasma has electromagnetic properties. So it doesn't
right.
Yeah.
So it's completely false, and that's why it's a perfect Cavendish explanation for gas pressure without a container, because it doesn't work. Do you understand?
Seems like a false equivalence, though.
Everything in the globe and all the arguments involved are false equivalents. That's how it's built.
That's what Arwen is saying. He's saying they use this false equivalence as their answer, and they're sitting up with their bow tie looking pretty when they haven't answered anything.
Yeah, when they show you something like that, they show you a diagram.
Say that again.
When they can't show you a false equivalency like that, like with a plasma being attracted to a magnetic field, which is completely false equivalency. When they can't show you something that is not a false equivalency, all they can show you other than that is a diagram.
What's wrong with diagrams? Ain't that science?
No.
Oh, okay.
But I guess the answer to your question, Nathan, is there is no experiment, given that we're in a gravitational field on their model, that demonstrates that it doesn't disperse. I just find that glaring omission huge.
It would disperse. That's why space is fake. Any evidence of a physical geometric spheroid horizon formerly known as Earth curvature?
Before we go there, the last thing Sleeping Warrior said was on their model. Well, they can have as many models as they want, but if none of them relate or work with reality, what do we call that model?
Pseudoscience.
Yeah.
The model formerly known as scientific.
What about the horizon formerly known as Earth curvature? We only have one horizon, and the horizon in their globe Earth geometric model is physical. But we've only got one, and it's non-physical. So, any evidence of Earth curvature, formerly known as
That's
geometric
not-
horizon?
Well, they still remember that argument and accept it, even though they can't use it anymore.
We wouldn't expect to see it, is what they say now, but they used to say it blocks the bottoms of boats and buildings when it was physical at one time.
But they still do.
Well, then how could they say we wouldn't expect to see it?
Because they're countering an actual argument against it at that point.
So they're countering
But then they
themselves.
just forget about it right after, so they can reassert it.
So
how
they're
it works.
countering them. So they're countering themselves then?
Yes.
Uh,
Yes. For example, Tim Osman. Nobody claims the horizon is Earth curve when presented with the black swan.
Would maybe a change if that question, well, maybe it wouldn't be better, but maybe the question, is there any evidence that Earth has curvature to it? Because
Well,
same
Earth
question
does,
though.
Earth does have curvature topography. Yes, we
yeah,
have
but
hills,
maybe
valleys.
consistent curvature. I don't know.
No,
maybe
but we're
just
talking
looking at the map.
curvature that's consistent with a sphere. So if you're going to have curvature consistent with a sphere, you got to have a radius. So that's going to tell you that at 1 foot elevation, looking at the ocean, which water finds its level, the curvature, the horizon where the curvature should start, can be no more than 1.22 miles at a 1 foot observer height. Once that got debunked, we no longer have a radius or live on a sphere. It's all been made up.
Precisely. Any evidence of axial rotation of the Earth-based variety?
Not of the Earth-based variety.
They just assume that they're looking south when they look at the southern rotation point. They don't demonstrate that it is south relative to all observers at the same time. They just assume that it's south because it's the thing they're looking at and they denote that to be south. That's just assumption that it is south when in real world it isn't south, and they've got an adjustment for it called declination to explain away why it is that we don't actually look south. I find it astonishing that they ignore this.
They also automatically assume that the south is antipodal on a spherical surface.
Correct, yeah. They assume that they're looking. Yeah, that's right. It's the same, basically the same point. That's true. I just find it outrageous that they just ignore this.
Well, this is their whole point. They always have assumed it because they must make it work on a sphere. So they're always assuming a sphere. They're always assuming a radius, and then they do funny math to somehow show it to you.
Right.
But the funny math doesn't work out.
Right. Globers are masters of presupposition. They know how to presuppose the Earth is a ball in the most elaborate fashion out there.
So this example is always going to be cemented in my mind because it's how I learned the formal logical fallacy of affirming the consequent, which is if P then Q, Q therefore P. If the Earth is a sphere, P, then we will observe star rotation in the southern hemisphere, that's Q. We observe star rotation in the southern assumed to be hemisphere, that's Q. Therefore Earth's a sphere, P. If P, then Q, Q, therefore P. If Earth's a sphere, star rotation southern hemisphere, star rotation southern hemisphere, therefore Earth's a sphere. And it's always always what goes through my mind when anybody affirms the consequent for anything. I always think of star rotation, because for many people, they don't notice the trick. And when somebody drops in the word hemisphere, they don't realise that their opponent is automatically assuming that when you travel out towards the horizon in a southerly direction, that when you arrive at your destination, you are antipodal from where you began, because you've merely assumed that the stars that were above your head in the north are now below where you were standing in the north when you arrive in the south. Antipodal from where you began, by assumption only. So their example starts with the assumption that you're going to travel to the southern hemisphere. But, well, hold on. You're supposed to be proving we're on a sphere, not assuming that I travelled to the bottom of one in your example, and then make an example and claim that it's only because of your assumption that we travelled to the bottom of a sphere that that's occurring at all. Affirming the consequent. Any evidence of a self-perpetuating molten iron core at the centre of a presupposed spherical Earth?
Now, the deepest hole that we've got is called the super deep borehole, where seismology made 4 predictions, all 4 of which turned out to be incorrect. And that's the most data that we've got. It's about 7 miles deep, roughly. That's it.
Any evidence of the distance to the sun?
It's over there. So bright.
No. Again, they assume that the Venus is the same size as Earth. They assume that the Earth is... Yeah. But it's all assumptions. We just assume that it's a ball, therefore it is a ball. We assume gravity is a force, then it is a force. What gravity?
Any scientific evidence for the reification of gravity?
See, when you realise that the lightest known material known to man as far as Google's concerned is the aerogel stuff, and there's one now called graphene aerogel. Shout out to Rachie with all the zeros for telling me about this. Graphene aerogel claims to be less dense than helium, but it doesn't rise. They say that they make an adjustment inside the composition of graphene aerogel that removes the air out of the product to make it essentially, on paper, lighter than helium. But in real world, it doesn't float, it still sinks. So when you realize that even objects that we can make that are supposed to be less dense than helium, they all fall, then that falling is falling for a reason, and it's because they're more dense than the medium that they're in. And we can prove it by giving the medium a bit of a wiggle. And if we manipulate that medium, it causes an object to accelerate. And therefore, it's now explained why we don't have gravity. Once you explain what the cause of the perception of gravity is, you don't need any science to explain this or to prove it. It's outside of science. It's now explained. So relative density is now kind of progressed from an explanation to a explanation. And that explanation now falls outside of scientific method, because now you are no longer ignorant. You know what the reason for why objects seem to accelerate on Earth. And it is because of that relationship between the matter and the medium it's in. Now you know that. We don't need to do any science on it.
Any single viable hypothesis from any of the fields of astronomy, cosmology, or astrophysics?
Nah, Eddington was a fraud.
What, just looking at stuff? That's not science.
According to Fight the Flat Earth, it is. He cites Eddington as a proof of gravity. He argues that it's a force in the same sentence as using Eddington, which was an observation only, as a proof, a supporting piece of evidence for gravity. The guy's a clown.
Is that it? Did we do all the housekeeping questions? I think so.
Yeah, I think so.
Anthony, did you say a minute ago that there is a type of aerogel that is claimed to be lighter than helium?
Yeah, but you're a bit quiet, Brian. Do you want to get a bit closer?
Sorry. Did you say a minute ago that there is an aerogel that is claimed to be lighter, than less dense than helium?
Yeah. The claim is that graphene aerogel is lighter than helium, but they put a really nasty... I'll read to you what it says from Wikipedia. It's outrageous.
Not light, then it can't be.
I know.
But that's a lie.
Hold on. Say
Has
that
to be
again,
straight
Brian.
up like.
I missed what you said.
I agree.
We don't know what we're agreeing to. You talked over each other. Brian, can you repeat what doesn't happen again?
Well, the claim that this type of aerogel is lighter than helium must be a lie if it's not rising, because anything that is more dense than air will not rise through it. But if it's of the same density or more or less, then it will rise.
That's why they gave it a nice caveat. Listen to Riley real quick.
Okay.
What I'll do, I'll put it on screen because this needs some discussion. Nathan, if you wouldn't mind presenting, I want to show this because this is basically weaseling. This is a brilliant example of weaseling. And I just want to show the audience because this is how they make something sound like something when it's not. It's a bit like the PCR testing. They make it sound like something it's not. I won't go into that, but this is what they're going to do. Do you see aerographene on screen, Nathan?
I do.
Anybody? I do. So it says aerographene or graphene aerogel is, as of April 2020, so we're bang up to date, the least dense solid known at 160 grams per meter cubed, less than helium. It is approximately 7.5 times less dense than air. So that claim, if it's less dense than air, it's going to act like helium or hydrogen. It's going to rise. But then it says, note that the cited density does not include the weight of the air incorporated in the structure. It does not float in air. That's like saying gravity is not really a force, but you can calculate it as though it's a force, in my opinion. What do you guys think about that?
This. No.
Well, it seems to suggest like it's a very thin substance that is basically pocketed with air.
Correct. Yeah, exactly. So in the same way as... hold on, Anthony. In the same way as you've got something like shaving foam, which is a solid with gas dispersed through it, what they're saying is that this has got air dispersed through it. So you've always got the density overcoming it with the density of air that's in between the gaps of this less dense material.
Okay, so that would imply that the air that they take out of it is acting like an anchor to it. But if they take that air out of it, then what are they doing? Are they leaving it as a void with nothing in it, or are they replacing it with what?
Well,
because it still doesn't make sense.
Well, maybe then the properties of it being that light has something to do with the structure of it, and that if they would actually make it that pure material, then it wouldn't be that low density anymore. You know, it was complicated stuff.
It's a bullshit claim.
Yes.
Basically, if you listen to it, it's a bit like saying that my can of beer that's made out of super light aluminium is less dense than the beer that's in it when I subtract the beer that's in it. Do you see what I mean? You're adding one thing, which because the structure of the graphene is so microscopically small, but it still forms a structure that's probably held together by the air. They're just claiming that structure, the little bit that the graphene takes up, is weighs less than the corresponding weight of everything in that whole space as it would have been, which I suppose technically it would be if you could have the aerographene in a vacuum, then you would be weighing it there. But then, of course, it wouldn't still float because you've took away the medium.
Well, the only way to
so
test
it's just
this,
a bullshit claim, isn't it? It's
well, unless you could validate it by you could evacuate the chamber, put your graphene in, and then you fill it with helium, right? And if it is less dense, then it should float up to the top of the helium.
No, because the claim they're making is it'll fill with helium because they're just small gaps. The gases will go in between the structural bonds and fill it. That's how aerographene works. It's because there's so many little air pockets that the heat can't dissipate through it.
I see. So you're
so
saying
it would just fill up with helium and therefore would still weigh more than the corresponding space of the helium because you've got the helium plus the graphene. But they're
saying they've got a solid structure that when it's split up and very fine, you can, like if you get some of that stuff that you make cobwebs out of for Halloween, it starts off as quite a chunky bit of cotton wool looking stuff, and then you tease it and tease it and tease it till it gets thin like spider's webs, right? Well, when you've done that, you've obviously got stuff dispersed between it. But it's like, well, no, the density of the fibre web, if I say that in a square centimetre is X density, you're like, well, yeah, it is. But the overall density of the material is still more dense than the air it's in. You're just saying that if you take the overall amount of material that's so thin in a given area, it's actually calculated as less dense if you take the air out of the equation. But you can't, because it's always going to be dispersed with whatever gas it's situated in. Therefore, it's not less dense. It's just a Weasley way of saying it's less dense because it's very finely distributed over a given area, correct?
Yes.
I agree. You can't say.
I think it's a bit.
They can't make the claim. They can't make the claim that it says that it's less dense than helium, if it does not float in air. That's a direct contradiction, in my opinion, and I think that that's misrepresentative. And it's basically bullshittery from people that want to make this sound better than what it is, probably for NASA to buy it off them or whatever. But the point is, if you're going to claim that it's like one thing, but really it's not, that's lying.
Well,
it's
an equivalent. See if this works. So, in the same way, if you take it to a different extreme, you say, well, an iron anvil will float on mercury. However, if I take the same exact material, the iron, and make it like my spider web, make it really thin and wispy, same material, but really thin and wispy, and I go, well, that's not going to float on mercury. And you go, yeah, it would. It would still float, right? It doesn't matter that the material can get in between the gaps. It would still float because it's a less dense material. So therefore, if it doesn't float, i.e. the gaps just fill up, it's a bit of a false equivalence because we're talking about liquid rather than gas between, but it's still close enough for me to make this comparison. I would suggest that regardless of how thin you made that material, it would still float on the mercury. It would never sink between it because of the gaps. Am I wrong?
No. But this is. I think this claim is lies. I'll tell you why. Because the material itself is said to be lighter, less dense than helium, and the claim that it doesn't rise because air goes within it. Well, air is the same density as air. The material is supposedly less dense than helium. If you put helium in a balloon, the balloon itself is more dense than air, but because of the air and the helium, it rises. The air outside and the helium inside, it rises. So technically that air should be displacing that, if that was true. I call total BS on that whole thing.
Yeah. If it's lighter than air, it should displace the air. You don't need the helium.
Well, yeah, because the other thing they're implying that the air is acting like an anchor in the substance. And it's like, at the end of the day, it still comes back to, if they're going to claim that it's less dense than helium, then the way to demonstrate that is to put it in air and see does it float. If you're going to weasel around with the maths to make an adjustment for why it doesn't do it, then the claim must fail. It's that simple.
Right, now relate this to gas pressure without a container. Otherwise, this was pointless.
Well, so gas pressure. No, wasn't it to do with gravity?
I don't know. You've got to loosely connect this to a claim that's actually made on the show, or to do with flat Earth or globe Earth now.
Yeah,
it was to do with gravity. Once you realise that the least dense materials, that even are claimed to be less dense than helium, still go down because essentially they are not less dense than helium. But now that you know that, then it's no longer something that's needed in science because it's now explained. You don't need to explain. You don't need to prove something that's already explained. It's demonstrable. It's repeatable. But it's already explained. You now know that you don't need gravity.
Well, this claim, I will take a shot at it. This claim that this material is less dense than helium completely debunks the claim of gravity. Because gravity is supposed to be bringing things down, but helium or anything that's like helium, hydrogen, anything that's where helium is, let's say like in a balloon where it's gathered together, then their claim is that due to buoyancy, which is based on the gravity mass attracting mass equation, it's displaced up to it, right? So how come this is not being displaced? Due to their buoyancy, which is part of their mass attracting mass, even though that's completely out of date. You know what I'm saying? So this claim of this thing doing what it is and doing what it does, it is a debunking of the claims of their own model. Or the mainstream model, sorry.
I see. I get it.
I think, Nate, the only thing in terms of density is, I would say, is the aerographene set up in a structure. And if you think of it a bit like Meccano sort of thing, if you were to take down all the Meccano and stack it back up to put it back in the box, then it'd be very dense, wouldn't it?
Right.
When it's in that structure, a lot denser.
Right. Exactly. So if you take each connecting part of this graphene or whatever it is, you'd say, well, you just take one strand and calculate the density based on the area that it's in for that one strand, and you probably find that it's actually quite dense.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly as I understood it, Adam. Excellent stuff. Meanwhile, gravity itself is currently described as the bending of a conceptual medium based on the uneven distribution of mass mathematically. So nothing to do with any forces pushing things up or down. Everything to do with conceptual mediums being bent. And you can't see a conceptual medium. We don't exist in a conceptual medium. A conceptual medium is merely something used to do maths. Nothing to do with reality. That's gravity currently. No challenge from anyone in Discord on this gravity?
Yeah, it must be a bit of a bummer to now have gravity explained. Falls outside a scientific method because it's explained. It's the phenomena that we observe doesn't actually exist. That must be a bit of a bummer if you're a blurther, because don't you need that on your model? Don't you need that to explain certain stuff? Well, a lot of stuff. Yeah, it's not science anymore, guys. It's explained.
Weird how they use it to explain stuff when often the thing that they're using it to defend. I've heard flat earthers in the past say, oh, gravity's just like the magic word they use to explain everything. Well, yeah, it is. They just blurt it out whenever there's something difficult that they can't explain. But it's very rarely actually applied in terms of what gravity really is. And half of them don't even know what it is. That's the conclusion. More than half don't know what it is.
Yeah, gravity at present in their model is apparent orbits. That's actually
Yeah, apparent orbits. They're not actually orbiting. They're going in along a straight geodesic path, which kind of indicates like a Mercator projection, which is like a square map or rectangular map, where it indicates that they're traversing over us in straight lines and then looping back round Pac-Man style. I'm not saying that that's what's going on, but that is the implication when he says that the geodesic paths are straight. It's like, so what is going on then? Maybe he wasn't telling lies. Maybe that is what's going on, and we're just, I don't know, but it's definitely not orbits.
Yeah, and how can you have it through... Sorry, go on, Nathan.
It wasn't me. I was
Oh,
hoping... I was going to encourage you, actually, Brian, to explain the current... This is relatively new information to me in terms of how gravity is defined with orbits, but if you can launch into that, I'd be very grateful at this stage, because it's useful for the audience.
Yeah, no hassles. Albert Einstein in 1915 said that the uneven distribution of mass causes the curvature of space-time. The curvature of space-time, if you is claimed to be gravity. Gravity is claimed to be the curvature of space-time, and the effect that we are told we will see or observe is apparent orbits. That is that. Einstein never defined clearly what he meant by effect, other than saying apparent orbits, and he never defined what he meant by the word mass. So that is gravity at present. Is that okay, Nathan? Nathan?
Yes. Sorry, my mute button. There's a few people who were off mute while you were saying that. Nobody's piped up from Discord, though.
Hey, you guys. Good morning.
Yeah.
Discord.
There you go. I knew someone wanted to add something. Go ahead, Stigoli.
Well, I think I talked over Truth Be Told. I was trying to get one of these ballers in here. Ratio Swan is talking a lot of stuff in the chat. Hop in VC, man.
Yeah, I wanted to add something earlier, but it's not about the current what so-called gravity is, but Newton's gravity. I mean, I've been trying to read through it, and from a layman's point of view, it's quite daunting. I'm talking about the Principia, right? But the title of it is intriguing for me because in the Principia, obviously, it's written in Latin, right? But the translation of it, it's weird. It's mathematical principles. Now I'm thinking, am I understanding that incorrectly, or you know what I mean? If is it all based on maths, or what is it? Maybe I'm not really clued up to understand that.
No, maths because it's maths.
Well, I would say most of the translations of the Principia, as it comes from Latin, what can happen is the belief system that was based around it then changes the translations, because it's like the words gravitas and masse mean gravitas means weight or heavy in Latin. It's just a description, and masse means a large amount of something, right? That's basically what it means. There is a few other meanings to it, strangely enough, in Latin as well, but the basic of it is a large amount of something or accumulation of matter type thing. But if you have a belief and you're in 2021 translating that, your belief is going to color the translation. And if there's mathematics in it, the mathematics are based on weight. It's about weight, what causes weight, and why things are heavy or not heavy. And it's basically an unfinished work, really, in a lot of ways, because Newton could never get to the bottom of, I don't think, or at least it was claimed that he never got to the bottom of what he was trying to find out. That would be, you have to take that into account if you're looking at the Principia, because in Latin a lot of words are brought, sorry, in English there's a lot of words that are brought from Latin, but they are then changed in their definition. So people will take their belief when they hear the word gravitas, they put in the word gravity and straight away make it into a force of attraction between masses. Whereas gravitas doesn't mean a force of attraction between masses. It's just a description of heavy or weight. You know, examples like that. Examples like that is what will cause a bad changeover linguistically, if you know what I mean.
Perfect. With that, I'm going to say, if you are watching this on either Nathan Oakley 1980 or Nathan Oakley Premiering streams, then stay tuned, as there will be an after show to follow. Unfortunately, if you are watching this live, this is where we bid you farewell. So a huge, massive, enormous thank you to both Discord and G+ panels for making today's live show possible. Also, below this video, there is a link to get £50 for swapping your UK electricity supplier to Octopus Energy. Mad thanks to all of you who smashed the super chat, liked, commented, shared, subscribed, and all that good stuff. Once again, stay tuned if you're watching on either Premiering stream. I've been Nathan Oakley, and I'll see you all in the next video.
What a lovely day!